This episode is brought to you by Communications Training for Coffee Teams, a new Map It Forward workshop tailored to get your team communicating more confidently to improve general mental health as well as business profitability. Click the link in the show notes for further details. Welcome to our final episode of our 5-part series with Muki Yeung. Muki, this has been a really insightful conversation about Kenyan coffee and the Kenyan value chain. Throughout this discussion, we have explored climate, as we spoke about in the last conversation. We've talked about people's perception of Kenyan coffee. We've talked about the pandemic and Kenyan coffee. We've covered a lot of stuff. Moving forward, I think globally there's a few challenging years ahead. What are the challenges that are going to be faced by Kenyan coffee producers over the next, let's say, decade or half a decade?
I think straight up, the first one would be access, just access to inputs, to technology, to equipment. Mm-hmm. It's not as easy as somewhere as like say Brazil, where it's easy to find source equipment, mm-hmm. Source inputs. It's very expensive to import anything into Kenya. Mm-hmm. So things move at a slower pace there. People can't innovate. They can't improve. Sometimes it's just due to the limitations of what they can access. And mm-hmm. It's not, even for bigger companies, it's very, very expensive to update your equipment, to train all your staff, to bring in these necessary fertilizers or sprays or compared to some of the surrounding countries. I think another big challenge that we have is I don't know how to word this very well, but government involvement. We've just had a change in the government in power. Mm-hmm. Quite often, as these things happen, someone gets put into a position that they really are not familiar. Well, they're put in a position of power where they can make decisions for an industry that they are not familiar with. Mm-hmm. I think the system in Kenya, while it's not perfect, it works. It works in the way that a buyer is able to build a relationship with a producer, and both sides are able to pick who that service provider is, and you have to work hard in making sure that your producer is well looked after and that they're happy, mm-hmm. or that your buyer feels like they are well looked after and they're happy, mm-hmm. or they can go to someone else. But I think heavy-handed government involvement in this, forcing change without really talking to either party, to any party, is going to be a huge challenge in the coming years. Like we've seen historically in Kenya, we've had some issues in the past. Mm-hmm. If anyone knows people who have experience in Kenya are familiar with the situation that we had in Nyeri many years ago, that's something that we don't want to see happen again. Mm-hmm. But it's always possible. Someone gets involved because they feel like they can make a bit of money or they can cut off something. I'm not going to say that always happens. There are good people out there too.
Right.
But, we've seen in many other countries how this can create headaches. And sometimes you were lucky and it only lasts a year or two and you go back to the way that works. But, yeah, if they could just at least ask and see if this is what the people really want, not in the case it's not. I hope that we will continue to see consistent demand for Kenyan coffees. Our quality speaks for itself. I think we're very mm-hmm. lucky in that way. But I don't see production increasing over the next 10 years. And that's something that we're really going to struggle with as people phase out of coffee. At the consumer end, I don't think we see why. I think we hear a little bit about it. We have an older generation moving away from coffee. Look, we're going to see this overall all around the world. It's also not just going to be in Kenya. How can we expect a generation that has been told to put their kids through school, to want certain things out of life, to they wanted their kids to become to not be farmers, essentially, because it's not an easy life.
No, it's uncertain, and it has a lot of speculation in it, and you're at the whim of others, and it's hard.
Yes, it's a hard life. How can we expect them to stay or encourage their children to pick this up? And we will see over time, not just in Kenya, but elsewhere, probably a reduction in people who want to become coffee farmers. We might see a consolidation of these small holders into a larger estate, because there are some people who have access to the capital who are expanding coffee production in Kenya. So we'll probably likely see a slow increase in small to medium-sized estates. But I feel like numbers of smallholders in Kenya will slowly dwindle. How that will affect coffee production overall in Kenya, we're yet to see, because at estate level sometimes they, due to the efficiencies that you can have, they are able to produce more. So maybe that will balance things out. It's just all speculation.
Right.
I don't see many young people wanting to move into coffee, though. That being said, there is a very, very strong interest in agriculture in Kenya. It is what Kenyans have done since time immemorial, since they've been able to farm. Like, this is the birthplace of agriculture, the Rift Valley in Africa. There are people who have farmed forever since the invention of agriculture. So it's in their system. I have a colleague who is an incredibly intelligent, very, very highly educated woman. Her retirement plan is to go into farming. And I feel like that is the case for many, many Kenyans. At the end of the day, regardless of if they sit at a desk job, regardless if they're CEO of the company, if they can have a farm, they'll do it. So maybe we will see new people enter into coffee. It's hard to tell, really. I can only hope that it will improve over time. But I think there will be dips. It'll take time to correct itself.
How do you think, if we end up in a world war, how does this end up impacting Kenya?
Well, I hope that we're at a distance to it enough that it won't impact us. If Kenyans became quite reliant on wheat as a dietary staple over the past 100 or so years. And the majority of that wheat was sourced from Europe, Eastern Europe. With this possible drought and famine that could come through, people could go hungry but maybe we will also find alternate sources if that's what the country is working towards. But as we've been very lucky not to have any serious wars in my lifetime, at least. Generally, if there was a world war, a lot of resources would be pushed towards the military. So they might not even get an option to purchase from countries like Australia, from Brazil, from the US, if they were to be involved in a larger war. I'm not sure. I don't think Kenyan will actually play a physical part in it unless it was to come close to us.
Right.
We've got our own issues that we want to worry about.
Yep.
People need to just get on things here. They need to feed themselves. That I think they would see, like, why should we get involved in something that doesn't really concern us?
Right.
That level.
I mean, the times ahead.
But at the same time, we have a new government in Kenya that really wants to prove themselves. So, something
That
could
is
happen there
very
too.
nouveau chic right now, isn't it?
Mhm.
Let me put my stamp on it and let everybody see that I'm I'm capable. There's
Yes.
great
Yeah.
things to that, and there is some not great things to that. If we're looking forward, we've discussed what the challenging things are for Kenyan coffee production and Kenya as a value chain moving forward. What are you hopeful about?
Well, I'm hoping for a resurgence in people's love of Kenyan coffees, and that's something that I've heard, uh, luckily, from quite some big names in coffee that I've bumped into over the last year or so. Is, we've gone through quite a number of years of this crazy innovation,
Mm-hmm.
which I love in many ways. I
You're
love that we're
talking
trying
about
new
like all
things
the
in coffee.
fermentation and stuff
Yes.
like that.
Yep.
Okay.
We should try new things. We should see how we can push the limits and the boundaries of what coffee is. But at the same time, I love that Kenyan coffee is good just in its way. It hasn't changed in many respects, and people love it for what it is. And I hear that from people. I've been told that they don't want to see change because it's so special in the way that it is. There's
Mm.
nothing else like it. And I'm hoping that maybe we'll take a few steps back and people will learn to appreciate it again for what it was. Um, like we've done with other things, like we've done with
Yeah.
wines, and cheese making, or like we can respect how how Italians make cured meats in a way that's unchanged in the
Yeah.
traditional method, or the French or the Spanish make wine in a classic European way that I feel like we're going back to. And you know what? In Kenya, we haven't changed.
Yeah.
And when I went into it, I found that shocking that, hey, the proof is in the cup and it works. It's there's a lot of hard work that goes into it, without a doubt. But hey, there's some kind of special magic there that the coffee is outstanding and unique. Yeah,
So,
without all the additions.
yeah, it's I find Kenyans to be dependable coffees.
Mhm.
I find Kenyans to be the most reliable coffees that I drink. I know if I'm going to drink a Kenyan, and I love Kenyan coffees, I know that I'm most likely going to get a great cup. And
Yeah,
that's why I'm somebody who I like things that are reliable. I like things that aren't pretending. Kenyan coffees are not pretending.
it is what it is,
It
and
is what
it's
it is.
fantastic.
Yeah. So if people want to, let's say there's cafe owners or roasters out there that have listened to silly people on the internet trying to talk shit about Kenyan coffees, and they are going to make their first foray into Kenyan coffees. How do they go about finding that?
There are some fantastic companies all around the world that are still sourcing and have a long relationship sourcing fantastic quality Kenyans. Um, just go out and look for them. If you don't know, if you need a suggestion, you're all anywhere around the world, anytime, you're welcome to reach out to me and I'll let you know where to find it.
And if you do want to reach out to Muki, what's the best way people can contact you? Via email or through social media?
Just hit me up on Instagram. I'll
Yep.
definitely get to you.
We
Yep.
will include Muki's details in the show notes. And folks, believe me when I tell you, Muki is not going to bullshit you. Muki is just going to talk straight. And it's why I have a lot of respect for her. It's a value I see in people that is really important. And so Muki's always been someone who has tried to help people whenever the opportunity is there. So just reach out if you do have questions, and don't be shy about it. We're here to
Don't be a
make the
stranger.
industry yeah. We're here, well, and we're here to make an industry more responsible and
Yeah.
accountable for itself, right?
I would probably close this up with saying, like, look, I grew up in coffee, as I like to put it. I was once a barista. I was once a barista trainer. Like I've worked in cafes that all I did was pump out coffees as well. And I was very lucky to make my way up to where I am now. But I've been blessed, very lucky, and very grateful that I've been able to work with the people that I've been able to work with over the last couple of years, and I have access to this wealth of information that is not widely available to everyone in the industry. I'm so happy to be able to share it, and I would love to share it. So if you have any questions on any part of the industry, whether it's working in green, producing coffee, working as a barista, working as a roaster, whatever it is, I'm no means an expert on everything, but I will gladly share my experience and what knowledge I have with those who want it.
And there's nothing else that needs to be said. Muki, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and gracing us with such a beautiful conversation over these 5 episodes. Our industry is better for having people like you in it. So thank you for everything that you do in the industry. Peace, love, and peanut butter, everyone. Have an amazing rest of your day. Thanks, friends. If you enjoyed this video, here's what you should check out next. Consider supporting Map It Forward on Patreon and be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell before you leave.